YouTube community, Temptations fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about a transitional album, if you will, by the Temptations, Gettin' Ready, released in June of 1966, June 15th to be exact. As I said, this album was a bit of a transition because this is right at the end of the tail end of Smokey doing stuff for them, and then right at the beginning of Norman Whitfield doing stuff for them. So you've got both worlds on you. You've got Gettin' Ready, or Get Ready, the Smokey song, and then Ain't Too Proud to Beg by Norman Whitfield, or produced by him anyway. So the reason why that's important is because the Temptations were definitely Smokey's project for a handful of years there, and then Norman Whitfield had really wanted to produce them for a long time, and he asked Berry Gordy. He was like, "Hey, can I produce the Temptations at some point? Can I work with them?" And Barry was like, "Well, if Get Ready doesn't do well, if it doesn't become a top 20 Billboard pop hit, then yeah, you can." And I think it just missed it or just hit number 29, so it didn't hit the top 20. And so Norman got to work with the Temptations from there on out, basically for the next 7 years or so. And Ain't Too Proud to Beg did go to number 1 on the R&B charts, which Get Ready also did as well, but it hit number 13 on the Billboard Pop chart single, so did really well for itself. And over the next couple of years, while David was still in the group, they definitely had more of a when it came to their singles anyway, there was definitely a lack of ballads for sure. There was definitely more of a harder edge kind of approach, like I Know I'm Losing You, I Can Never Love Another, why am I drawing a blank here? Beauty's Only Skin Deep. I guess you can toss that one in there too, but this is a really, really good album. And it's kind of a mixed bag too. That's why I kind of like it, because you definitely get lead vocals from all of them, except for Otis on this one. And there's some older stuff on here too, which definitely kind of doesn't really fit with the rest of the feel of the record. But there were a handful of B-sides on this thing this album produced some B-sides that were on other songs, like I've Been Loving You, where'd it go? I've Been Good to You was the B-side to You're My Everything a year later in 1967. And where'd it go? You're Not an Ordinary Girl. That was a B-side to Beauty's Only Skin Deep a couple months later. And what's cool about this too is this came out in June, and in August the Greatest Hits album came out. So only a couple months later you got the official Greatest Hits, the first one from them, which featured both of these big singles on there. So I love the back cover on this thing. Look at this. They just look so cool. All fancy with their top hats and canes. Just looking awesome, man. So yeah, the new tracks on here, the new style, if you will, really works well for them. And David's leads on here are awesome. At this point, he had proven himself as a fantastic lead singer, having done My Girl and It's Growing and Since I Lost My Baby. So he was really proving himself as the new guy who could really, really sing. Meanwhile, Paul and Eddie were still there doing leads as well, but David had definitely kind of taken the spotlight a little bit more from them. Well, more so from Paul, really, than Eddie, but Say You is the opening track on here. I love the drum fills on this one. The kind of sympathetic sounding strings on this is really nice. They kind of they sound like they're weeping in moments, which is pretty cool. And the reverb on David's voice in moments is great. There's a little bit of echo in the background, which I think is really cool. The bridge on this is really sweet. Melvin gets a line, Eddie gets a line. So it's nice to have that kind of camaraderie of a few of them doing different lines of one song, which what they would do a few years later when Dennis joined, where every song was like that. This song is cool. It's got an overall feeling of longing and wanting and just trying to, prove your love to someone. But I love the blend. It's got a really good, warm, heartwarming feel to this track. Little Miss Sweetness is really cool. The chugging rhythm on the chorus section of the song is excellent. It's unlike any other song I've heard from them around this time. So it's a little bit unusual, but the track itself is cutesy. It's about comparing a girl to cake or candy or anything sweet, and just basically saying you're as sweet as these things. It's kind of like the way you do things you do, but with food. So it's kind of like that. It's a really good song though. David on lead, of course, again, and the horns on this song are really good. But that chorus is just so unusual. If you listen to anything about that song, dig into the chorus, because that's such a cool rhythm that they produce. And then you get the smash hit single, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, one of their most well-known, famous tracks. I mean, this thing has been written about and talked about 100 times at this point. the timing and the use of blank space on this track creates such a hooky track. You get sucked into this mood so fast. The fact that it starts off with that drum fill and then just busts into David going, "I know you want to leave me." Like the feeling with this the two words "I know," you're instantly like, "Whoa!" And then that piano riff comes in, and it's like it's got this coy sort of feel to the riff. And then the song just like blasts in with the whole group singing with David. I mean, it's what a track. It's so youthful and alive and so full of pleading energy. Really one of David's absolute knockout performances with the group. It's just a magical song full of longing and full of like, I don't want this to end. I'll do anything, please. I'll be begging at your doorstep all night and day just to keep people walking away. I mean, it's a fantastic, fantastic song. It is upbeat. It's got a harder rhythm to it. It's got a drive. It's got a searching that just doesn't let up the entire time. It's a fantastic track. Then you get slapped in the head again with Get Ready right after that. You get this bombastic horn section leading this thing in with that. I love the crisp drum sound that all of these Motown songs had back then. But that drum fill when it kicks in as well, you get sucked into this rhythm. And Eddie's vocals on Get Ready are absolutely fantastic. The swelling strings, the build-up that happens on and off. It's a really joyous and lush track, especially on the chorus. I mean, it's just got this uplifting melody that keeps going up and up and up and up. And the background vocals, the way the Tempts blend their vocals together and just nail that song, get really locked in. Absolutely fantastic track. It's just a fun, welcoming, and again, I'll use the word youthful track. It just sounds like the sound of young America, if you will. Fantastic song. Then you get Paul doing Lonely, Lonely Man in Mine. This song's really cool, too. I like this a lot because, I like Paul Williams' voice anyway, because his voice was always so reminiscent to me of Otis Redding, because he's got that same sort of delivery of, I'm at the end of my rope, I'm at the end of my feeling good about things right now, I'm really trying to prove myself. So just as much of a rawness that David had, there was an element of sadness to Paul's voice that really drove home the point of like getting inside the story, telling it from that narrative, and making you believe every single word he's singing. In a way that I don't feel like the other Temptations. Let me rephrase that. The Temptations were able to sing anything and lock into a story and really make it work. But with Paul's voice, there was just such a connection and honesty with the way he sang that does set him apart from the other guys. This is one of those things. His voice was fantastic. But the ooh stuff in the background is great. The horns have this big bombastic kind of thing again as well. And the drums on this one are cool. They basically have this non-stop momentum of fills throughout the whole thing. It's a soulful song. It's just a really cool, soulful song. Too Busy Thinking About My Baby and Side 1. And this song a few years later would become a humongous hit for Marvin Gaye. And that's how I knew it was from Marvin's track, which I absolutely love his version. But this song's really cool because Marvin's version is a little bit more polished, I'd say. And it's definitely a little bit more smoother, a little bit less rough around the edges. But I like the Temptations version because of that. I like the timing on it. I like the rhythm on it. It's a little bit gruff compared to what Marvin would do a few years later. But it's definitely got that bouncy swing to it, and the crisp drums on it really help. But Eddie's voice on this one I think is fantastic. It holds its own, for sure. It's definitely not Marvin's, but it definitely holds its own as a deep-cut album track at this point. Which I always love to see that, like especially with Motown, everybody was singing each other's songs, and it's always interesting how one song buried deep in an album somewhere could years later be a giant hit for somebody else on the same label. It's who knows what's gonna be a hit, I guess, but very cool. Side 2 starts with I've Been Good to You. And for this one for me has a very like late 50s, early 60s doo-wop feel. Eddie does a lead vocal on this one as well. It's a little bit reminiscent of like a slow dance, but it's got a good pep to it, so it's kind of like the peppy slow dance number, if you will. The piano leads in this one are pretty cool. It's a Lonely World Without Your Love. Really bright horns on this one. Just an excellent clean strummed guitar in the background. Big hand claps, which I think are always fun. Big exciting chorus. Classic upbeat Motown stuff here, so dig that one. Fading Away, this one for me is like the sequel to It's Growing, where it's just the opposite. So instead of things that are growing, it's things that are fading away. Um, you take things that would be disappearing, like, smoke phase, or, they mentioned cigarette ash, and so that kind of stuff, just things that break apart. The whole "You've Changed" line in the chorus, I think, is catchy, definitely an earworm. Pretty relaxed in the verses, but, the chorus is where it kind of builds up a little bit more. Nice placement for sequencing on this album. It's a good change of pace of a song to be on this in this order. Who You Gonna Run To? This song's really good. Paul does a lead vocal on this one too. What I like about this one in particular on the verses, he's so articulate with the way he delivers his vocal. He'll like really enunciate certain words. The way he says like heart, like you really hear each part of that word to really like drive it home how much he's like trying to deliver this message as perfectly clear as possible. One of the best songs on the LP, for sure. The background vocals on this one are just a knockout. And the chorus has that like heartbreaking magic feel. Very sort of like melancholic chords, but Paul doing his vocal thing over it, kind of riffing here and there. Man, awesome song. You're Not an Ordinary Girl. This one for me was also reminiscent of the way you do the things you do, where you're taking the idea of something and saying the opposite. So this is basically saying like, you're pretty much an angel. You don't have wings, but you're basically an angel. So it's like, all these really, really special things, but she looks like an ordinary girl even though she's not. So that kind of thing. But I like it, good constant drum on this thing, clean guitars, lush background vocals, just a fun Motown track. The last song on here is a very peculiar choice. Not Now, I'll Tell You Later. Mostly because it dates back to 1963, and Al Bryant is on this one. This is pre-David stuff here, and the Supremes do the girl parts on here, which is really cool. But who knows why that's here? Maybe there just wasn't enough material, and they had to fill out the album somehow, so they threw that on. It's a good song, but it sounds dated at this point. Between 1963 and 1966, a lot had happened musically, and there were some seismic changes at this point. I mean, think of the Beatles. In 1963, they were singing "She Loves You," and then by this point, they were recording "Tomorrow Never Knows." They were like a whole different band at that point. It's a good song, but it definitely has that like, song you'd sing in a frat in the early '60s kind of feel. It's very sing-alongy, hand-clappy, group vocal kind of thing. It's not bad. It just sounds kind of awkward compared to like, especially the stuff on side one, when you hear things like "Ain't Too Proud to Beg," and then you get a song like "Not Now, I'll Tell You Later." It's two different worlds. So that one does kind of feel a little out of place, but here's the back cover. Let me show you the inside sleeve. Here's the original sleeve. And I'll show you the record. This has the variant of the Gordy label at this point. This is an awesome album. What I like about it is that it feels like a group. It doesn't feel like one. I mean, Eddie does more of the lead vocals than anybody else in this thing, but because there is such a heavy influence on the background vocals, and Paul does get like 3 songs on this thing, which I think is cool. It definitely feels like a group effort before things were definitely more so on like the David Ruffin fronted songs, which I also love. I'm not putting those down, but this one definitely feels like this is still a group at this point where everyone gets an equal share. And after this, things would start to change a little bit. But after this, the singles were definitely more focused on David's voice, and he would be a little bit more egocentric about himself before he was asked to leave the group. But this is a fantastic album, easily a 7 or 8 out of 10 for me on this one. The only like negative thing I have to say about it really is the last song, "Not Now, I'll Tell You Later." I mean, for historical purposes, I guess it's cool to have the Supremes on there with them. That's awesome. But it does kind of sound really out of place compared to the rest of the album. So That's it. My favorites on here, man, I got a lot. Obviously, the big ones, Ain't Too Proud to Beg and Get Ready. Say You is fantastic. Too Busy Think About My Baby is really cool. Who You Gonna Run To is nice. Lonely, Lonely Man Am I. The whole thing is great. You know what? 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. My name is Giggens. This has been The Temptations. Getting Ready. Released through Motown Records, Gordy label in 1966. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.